This morning, we're standing by to hear from the House Oversight Committee after Ghislaine Maxwell, convicted of conspiring with Jeffrey Epstein to sexually abuse minors, after she and her attorneys are putting all kinds of conditions on possible testimony to that committee, including immunity. The committee's initial reaction, no, but we're expecting to hear more. Let's get right to CNN's Katelyn Polantz in Washington. And Katelyn, I have to say, hearing from Maxwell's attorney, they sound like they think they're in the driver's seat here.
They certainly are approaching this as a negotiation where they have a fair amount of leverage. So Ghislaine Maxwell, John, she is willing to talk. That's what her attorney is saying. But is Congress actually wanting to hear from her, given the demands that her attorneys are laying out? According to a letter obtained by our own Katelyn Polantz yesterday, the conditions, her attorney said, in response to this congressional subpoena, she was going to take the fifth. But if they want to actually hear from her, what she has to say, she wants a grant of formal immunity. She also wants the House Oversight Committee's questions in advance. In addition to that, she is asking for a delay for whenever she would come to talk to Congress, because she also, in her criminal conviction, is asking for help from the Supreme Court. She wants that resolved. That could be months from now. Her attorney also wrote in this letter, in response to the House Oversight Committee's subpoena, compounding these concerns are public comments from members of Congress that appear to have prejudged Ms. Maxwell's credibility without even listening to what she has to say or evaluating the extensive documentation that corroborates it. There's also, at the end of this letter, a suggestion that if President Donald Trump were to remove all of her legal risk with clemency, that's a pardon, then she would be willing to talk very openly with Congress. It's all on the table. Trump responded yesterday that nobody has approached him with it. Right now, it would be inappropriate to talk about it. So now we see what else happens. Ghislaine Maxwell, still unclear exactly what she would have to offer if she talked, and she is still serving a 20-year sentence at a federal prison in Florida.
Yeah, the non-answer from the president, an answer in itself when he refuses to rule out, granting a pardon or commutation for Ghislaine Maxwell. Katelyn Polantz in Washington, watching this for us. Thank you very much. With us now, former campaign manager for Marco Rubio's presidential campaign and partner for Firehouse Strategies, Terry Sullivan and Democratic strategist and president of New Heights Communications, Christy Setzer. And I actually want to do something a little different than people have been doing in the weeks that people have really been focused anew on the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. I want to focus on the victims for a second here, because last night I spoke with Randy Kogan, who is a trauma therapist who has spoken to these victims for decades now. And she's very concerned about some of the language being used, particularly what she heard from the president yesterday in regards to Virginia Giuffre, who worked at the spa in Mar-a-Lago. President Trump said of Jeffrey Epstein, he stole her. And this trauma therapist was concerned about that language. Listen.
That's exactly the kind of language I'm talking about. It dehumanizes these women. They have been trying to heal for 18 years. And every time they're on the road to recovery, something new comes out in the news. Something new, a meme in social media, a skit on a TV show, or a stand-up comedian bringing up Epstein. It's everywhere. So when they hear the fact that they're not being humanized, even by the president, they feel defeated.
You know, Christy, for all the interest in this month, but even before, what are the victims getting from this? What is justice for them?
Right. It's certainly not giving Ghislaine Maxwell immunity for her role in this child sex trafficking ring. Look, this has already gone to trial. She's been convicted. She's serving time in prison. It's very clear what Maxwell's role is right now. It is for her to do what she can to say that Donald Trump didn't play nearly as much of a role as you're thinking in all of this, that his relationship with Epstein wasn't as close as it probably looks from all the evidence around us. And meanwhile, they are being used as a football, right? Their stories have been lost in all of this. The fact of what actually happened to them. Now, look, is it possible that if Maxwell goes in front of Congress and is forced to testify, that we'll also hear a little more about what was done to them? I suppose it's possible. But again, we know what her role is. It is to exculpate Donald Trump from any sort of criminality in this. And that's a real shame.
Terry, I want you to comment on this and the idea of what is justice for the victims and who really is speaking for them right now.
John, you're first, I'm glad we're talking about the victims because it is so important. This has become a political football, which is, at the end of the day, this guy and frankly this woman are monsters. They're convicted of not only just sex trafficking, which is horrific, but of children. And I just, so my heart breaks for every one of these victims. As a father of a single father of a girl, it's just horrific. And it's been made a political football now. Pedophilia and sex trafficking isn't a partisan issue. But at the same time, we should not believe a darn thing that Ghislaine Maxwell says. I mean, why do we think she's going to start telling the truth now? She's going to say whatever she needs to try to get herself off the hook. And that being said, it's tough to balance what the victims need and getting justice. And if we can stop, it might be very difficult for these victims, but if we can stop one more pedophile or one more sex trafficker, it cuts both ways. So it's a very challenging thing to thread that needle of protecting the feelings of those victims, but also protecting potential future victims.
And I do think there are people, on both sides of the aisle who are seeking that same goal that you're talking about there. Terry, I want to ask, from a communications perspective, about how the president has handled this the last few days. To you, Christy, because the president has said, it's a non-story, really expressly says he kind of wants it to go away, then yet introduces a new timeline and new explanation in this long sort of, meandering comment on the plane. So what do you think about that?
It is hilarious that they want the story to go away because everything that they're doing actually prolongs the story. I mean, the Republican Party, Donald Trump and his administration have a full court press right now on, in theory, trying to kill the story, but actually prolonging it. You have Speaker Mike Johnson actually shutting down the House early, sending everybody home just so that people can't talk about Epstein, or at least he hopes that by the time they get back from August recess, that they will no longer be talking about Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Donald Trump's role in it. You have Pam Bondi, who spent months hiring 1,000 attorneys to comb the Epstein file, flagging any mention of Donald Trump in it. That sure doesn't seem innocent to me. And then you have Donald Trump itself freaking out about even the slightest intimation that he's close to Epstein, for example, with this Wall Street Journal story about the birthday letter that he sent to Epstein, right? So all of these actions are the actions of people who look extremely guilty. And then finally, you have yesterday these comments about, quote, he stole her, which, as you mentioned, is incredibly dehumanizing language and makes it seem as though perhaps Donald Trump also believes these girls are things to be owned rather than sentient beings who get to have agency and decide things for themselves. So all of it is incredibly concerning. And I will say one last thing, which is that it's pretty rare that the American public agrees 90% on something. But that's about the percentage of Americans, 90%, that say, release all the Epstein files, see what's there, we deserve the truth.
Terry, the other way to look at that, and I was wondering this when I was watching the video of him on the plane going on and on about it, is if he's determined that he doesn't have political risk here. There's nothing to indicate he's got any legal kind of sensitivity here at all, but that he's just decided this isn't hurting him politically, so I'll talk about it.
Yeah, I don't know that they've thought that far ahead. They definitely have mismanaged this from just a purely crisis management standpoint. But the flip side of that is it's so difficult to prove a negative. If he didn't do anything inappropriate or wrong, you're trying to prove a negative. It's like the old saying, Senator, tell me when you stopped beating your wife, when you never did in the first place. And so he's got to try to prove that. And yes, he's digging a deeper hole for himself, being clumsy, but that's often what happens when in a situation like this, when you've got nothing to hide, you do a poor job of explaining it.
Terry Sullivan, Christy Setzer, appreciate you both being here this morning. Thanks very much.